Hey, deserving listeners, it's time for me to react to your comments from my videos from last week. Let's get to it. The ultimatum. S. Molanita says, "Oh my god, I can't believe Dr. Kirk is commenting on this mess. Let me grab my popcorn and my Psychology in Seattle notebook." Yeah, so a lot of you have been asking me to watch The Ultimatum. I got a lot of requests for that. It's always good if you can DM me or email or whatever, because sometimes I don't know about a show, but I was interested in the show because we saw the trailer during Love is Blind, and I was interested in it. On the other hand, I was like, that looks like a disaster, but turns out it's kind of both. And the other thing here is you have a Psychology in Seattle notebook. Do we have merch for a Psychology in Seattle notebook? If so, that makes sense. But either way, are you taking notes when I make it? That's great if you are. I mean, I'm a professor, and I've been through a lot of school. I love taking notes as a student. I like it when my students take notes. You know, there's a lot of different things that we're covering. You got to remember things. Anyway, Antler says, "As someone who is child-free, you have no idea how many years I have heard I will change my mind. I am now 34 and so happy. My life is filled with dogs and adventures and a partner who is also not wanting children." Yeah, there's a ridiculous amount of oppression and stupid ideas about people who don't want to have kids, particularly young women. Ideas of there's something wrong with you, you're cold, you're naive, were you traumatized? It's like, you know, plenty of people don't want to have kids. And it's not a new phenomenon either. It's, I think, an increasing choice that people are making, possibly because they're allowed to by society more so now. But it's always been a choice that people have made, you know, even 100 years ago. It's not. Anyway, Katrina says, "I feel like being 23 and dating for a year, that just isn't enough time to ask for an ultimatum." Yeah, I thought the same thing. I mean, this is just a cultural thing that for me, in my circle, people don't usually start thinking seriously about getting married until later than that. You know, a lot of the people are in their mid-20s. And I thought the same thing. But of course, you know, people can make their own choices. But it makes me wonder if some of the people on the show are rushing things. Who knows, though? I mean, you know, people, in the same way that I wouldn't oppress someone for saying that they didn't want to have kids, I wouldn't oppress someone for saying they wanted to get married at 25. And certainly 25 isn't super young. So, yeah. Having said that, if I were a friend or a therapist of some of the individuals who were giving the ultimatum, I would say something like, well, just give it a couple years. I mean, what's the rush? Is there a rush? Do you absolutely need to know now? The only thing I can think of that I would absolutely agree with is for some of them, they might be thinking, well, I want to get married. I want to have a family. I want to have kids. And if this individual won't marry me, then and I need to know that now, because if that's not going to happen, then we need to break up now, because that means I'm going to be single again. It'll take me a while to meet someone. It'll take a while to date that person before I know I want to get married to that person. So I need to nip this in the bud now. You know, for sure, that makes sense. Belinda says, "He said he was not attracted to her, not that she was unattractive." Yeah, so Colby was saying, you know, I don't want to be with you because I'm not attracted to you. She interpreted it as, you called me unattractive. And I think when I was reacting, I might have forgot exactly what he had said. Love is Blind. KM says, "I know Shane has talked about having ADHD, and emotional dysregulation is a less talked about part of that condition. Is this behavior you talked about in this episode possibly linked to the emotional dysregulation aspect of ADHD?" Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't know he had ADHD when I was watching the show. There were some red flags, I suppose, but there's a lot of different reasons why someone would present that way. But he has given interviews and come forward and says he has ADHD. And in a nutshell, with ADHD, when it comes to emotional regulation, your prefrontal cortex for a neurotypical individual, someone without ADHD, generally speaking, has a greater chance of being able to regulate their emotions, because there's when you have an emotion, there's a lot of different things that happen for you cognitively and emotionally and impulse-wise. You say with Shane, when he walked into the room and he's like, "Ooh, is it Shayna?" And he's like, "Oh, it's Shayna, great." And then Natalie's like, "Wait, this is Natalie. What did you wait, what's happening?" So in that situation, there's a lot happening. It's very quick, right? It all happens within a half second that He feels guilty. He feels scared he's going to lose Natalie. He feels confused. He feels angry. He feels like what's happening. And he feels overly judged. He feels hurt by that. And so there's a lot happening in that moment, a lot of emotions, very intense. And when you have ADHD, your prefrontal cortex, your executive function is the function of the brain that can orchestrate things. And so as you start to notice that you have, or even kind of pre-notice that you have these kinds of emotions, for someone without ADHD, they might have been able to navigate that a little better. They might not have been. I mean, it's not like having a typical executive function means that you automatically have the ability to regulate your emotions well. There are many different paths to having difficulty with regulating one's emotions. But if you don't have ADHD, you have a greater chance of being able to go, if you're Shane, better ability to go like, okay, wait, what's happening right now? I feel like I'm being blamed for something, and I don't want to lose Natalie, and I feel like I'm being, like, she's upset at me and she's angry at me, and I feel guilty, but I also feel like I shouldn't really feel guilty because Natalie's my number one. Shane is a distant second. I only thought it was her because it kind of sounded like her, and why did she say guess? Why didn't she just tell me right? There's a lot of things to go through, and possibly with greater reflection, and again, it happens very quickly, you'd have the ability to kind of organize your emotions very quickly, and you might say something like, oh, I'm just so sorry, and then you have another 5 more seconds to kind of gather yourself, and your ability to orchestrate and understand and also make plans, because a part of emotional responses and emotional regulation is the ability to plan very quickly, right? So in that moment, you're like, you might not be super conscious of the feeling, but you're like, oh, I feel a lot of feelings and I have a lot of impulses to say the way that Shane did, which was like, well, how come you're upset at me? He was kind of dismissive of her and like, I don't understand why I'm the bad guy. I can't remember what he said, but it was kind of along those lines. So you might have those impulses, but with a typical executive function, you have the ability to reflect on that and say, like, maybe that's not a good idea right now. And maybe I need to kind of relax and just say, okay, just maybe things will go okay. So that ability is generally considered to be an executive. I'm not really explaining this very well, but I hope you understand. My point is that for people with ADHD, it's harder for them to organize their emotions, make a quick plan for not only regulating their emotions, but also to navigate what's happening in the moment, an ability to kind of contextualize what's happening for them. It's harder for them, for sure. Having said all that, people with ADHD past the age of like 7 or 8 have all been traumatized by the fact that the society and their school or family is reacting to them in ways that don't account for their ADHD. So you're 6 years old and you're distracted, or you're not following the directions, not because you don't want to, but because your ADHD makes it hard for you. You're shamed, you're made to feel guilty, you're made to feel like you're a bad person. And so you early in life very quickly have a possibility of having a real sensitivity to being accused of things, and also a sensitivity to guilt. And there's various different ways of coping with this. And I think for Shane, one of the ways that, I don't know, he seems to cope with that guilt is to come out strong against it, to reject it and say like, no, there's something wrong with you. And we've seen that a few times with Shane, that he kind of attacks it. And it's possible that as he was growing up, he felt blamed for a lot of things that weren't fair, or he just figured it's easier just to come out strong. Who knows? But yeah, absolutely, his ADHD could have affected that. And then when he's at the wedding, which I don't know if I've posted those videos yet, we saw, and he's having a real tough conversation with Natalie. We saw potentially that issue coming up again, where it's hard for him to kind of organize his emotions, organize his thoughts. I mean, just think about it's hard for all of us. Just think about for someone that has a harder time with orchestrating what's happening in their body and their brain, having a harder time keeping straight a lot. Just another side note, with ADHD, there's typically a deficit with working memory, meaning that you can't hold on to a lot of little, it's sort of like, if I was to use a metaphor, you have your file cabinet, that's your long-term memory, and you have your table, which is your working memory, your short-term memory. And so when you're faced with a situation, like say you're heading out the door to go to work, you open the file and you start grabbing all the files that are involved with leaving the house. And maybe there's even just one file, and you open it up and there's like 50 different pages in that file. And so it's like, okay, make sure you have the proper socks, make sure you put shoes on, make sure you comb your hair, make sure that you lock the door. There's a lot of little things you got to do before you leave the house. With people who have ADHD, when they go to their long-term memory, they pull it out, and then I guess the metaphor with ADHD is that there's a windstorm in their office and it's constantly blowing crap off of their desk. And it's just like, or it's being pulled back into long-term memory or something. And so it takes tremendous effort to just imagine that a hurricane is happening and you're trying to keep track of all these pages on your desk. You're like, what am I supposed to do next? And it gets all messed up. And so for a lot of people, when you're dealing with emotions, you are experiencing, so add another thing that you're pulling out on the desk. Not only are you pulling out long-term memory in terms of like, how do I deal with emotions again? But you're also noticing like, what emotion am I feeling and what are emotions? There's a lot of learned experience that we're pulling from and we're putting on the table in terms of working memory. I'm feeling guilty. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling scared. I don't want to lose her. How do I deal with stuff like this again? How do other people react in situations like this? What's a better way of coming? It's all experience. That's maturity. It's all wisdom, and you're pulling it out. You're putting it on the table, and all of a sudden, windstorm, and then you don't know what to do, and you just, the one page you manage to grab onto, you just go with because it's the only thing you have to go off of. But if you didn't have a windstorm, you'd be able to actually kind of look at 7 different options and pick one that, and look at like, okay, what was that? Let's cross-reference apologizing with, how often did that work? That's working memory. And of course, when you have ADHD, it makes it a lot harder. Ben in Mahogany, NA says, yes, this is exactly it. I don't think that Ben is dangerous in a physical way, but he likely triggers a lot of unease and emotional concern in people. It can be so difficult to explain the sense of feeling uneasy and not knowing how to explain it to others. And it happens so often for women in these situations. It is a result of crappy socialization of both men and women. I wonder if Ben doesn't recognize how intimidating he is because he doesn't see himself as having a lot of power. Maybe he sees her as having more power because he has feelings for her, which makes him feel vulnerable. Regardless, their storyline has been super triggering, and people's intense commentary on both sides highlights how pervasive these narratives are and that they hit soft spots for a lot of people. Yeah, so with Ben and Mahogany, as I've been saying, I have no idea what is going on in Mahogany's mind. With other people on the show, with everyone, I never know what's going on in their mind and their hearts. But with a lot of them, like with Ben, I can take a guess and feel pretty confident in the guess or a set of guesses. With Mahogany, I have no idea, especially when we start learning that they got back together. Because as time went on, I was like, oh, she's never loved him. But then they get back together. He goes down, right? I don't know where we are in the reaction video posting, but if you've seen the tell-all, they dated again, and now they're back together, and then at the tell-all, she breaks up. I don't know. So I am totally confused. Now, I don't need to know. She doesn't have to present herself in a way that somehow makes her less confusing to me. It's her right to be however she wants to be, for sure. But I think it was triggering to me because of that. And I talked about how it triggered a relationship from when I was in middle school. I won't rehash that, but I've thought about it some more, and it's interesting to think about that. I just suddenly realized, wait, I think this reminds me of what it was like when I was in middle school, a relationship I was in middle school, of pursuing someone who gives a lot of indications. Of course, it didn't look anything like Ben and Mahogany because we were 13 at the time, but a lot of indications that you're into me, but always being out of sort of emotional, always emotionally distancing. Anyway, so that's how it triggers me. But for a lot of people, of course, people have been there's a lot of sexual trauma or abuse that's been happening. People have been commenting about how they are they're projecting their father onto Ben, that kind of thing. So, for those of you who have been sexually abused, the Ben and Mahogany storyline could be very triggering. And we don't know as viewers what's happening on screen. There are indications that Mahogany is being coerced. We also have to consider the producers of the show. I have a feeling that Mahogany is greatly coerced by the TV show in addition to Ben. I don't know that, though. It's just impossible to know. And of course, they sign contracts and stuff. By the way, someone actually reached out to me recently that was on another reality TV show like 10 years ago, and she was kind of like in a position of Mahogany, and told me, we went back and forth over email, and she really described what it's like to be on one of these shows, and it shed new light on the Ben and Mahogany situation for Mahogany's sake, independent of Ben. Just, she was speculating as to what Mahogany is going through in relation to the producers. Anyway, but yeah, so the thing that we can say is, me included, is that when we watch the show, regardless of who we're being triggered by, but Ben and Mahogany in particular perhaps, that it's more of a barometer for our own healing needs than some kind of firm conceptualization of what is happening to the individuals on the TV screen. I hope that is what we can pull away from it, because we deserve that, and for me, when I realized what was being triggered by Ben and Mahogany, for me, it's that I need love and attention to kind of heal myself from, it was, 40 some years ago that happened, 40 or 30 some years ago that happened. And I've had a lot of experiences that have healed me from that, but I clearly have still some pain around that. And particularly if I'm exposed to people like this, and my work with my clients kind of depends on me always striving to heal from as many traumas as I can, because it gives me a lower likelihood of being triggered by my clients, and a greater ability to retain compassion and objectivity, because countertransference can interfere with that. Anyway, Eve says, it seems to me that what happened is that Ben and Mahogany met online. She thought he was handsome. They had good conversations, but she probably mostly liked it that it was safe and low stakes. When he decided to go and meet her, she didn't want to, because she probably thought, oh no, this is getting too real. And plus, she was probably thinking about her lies and the filters, and that would catch up to her. He came anyway and has acted like a predatory creep who can't take no for an answer. She's 22. You don't make the best decisions at that age. Agreed. He's in his 50s. He should know better, and he should leave her the heck alone. Yeah, absolutely. It's one speculation, and that's kind of essentially my speculation as to what happened. That for her, it felt good to, feels good to flirt. And she was flirting with someone and didn't think she'd ever meet him, and that's why she was deceiving in some ways. And then when he came, but the big question is when he came down, why didn't she just not show up? Then you fast forward, and it's like, well, maybe she did. And I think the story that I developed was that, and again, this is just pure speculation based on like very little confirmation data, but it was like that. She was flirting and she was into it, but she was not serious about it. And of course, Ben was very serious about it. And she either didn't know he was serious, or she didn't care, or he comes down. The show, of course, is involved, because we know that the show is talking with her at that point, signing contracts, all that kind of stuff, offering money probably. And then she probably, this is pure speculation, thought, well, I don't want to meet up with him. My parents will never let this happen. I don't really want to be with him. He's so old. I had fun flirting with him online, but I don't want this to be an in-person real thing. But the show is here. Could be fun to go on the show. Maybe they're offering money. I don't know. So, okay, fine. And she, she's 22. She's barely 22. She was 21 recently at this point. She shows up, and she doesn't know what to do. And he's like trying to be with her because he's thinking this is genuine. And she's like barely in this. She's mostly, I think if to be as generous as possible, she was barely romantically invested and also curious about what it would be like to be on a TV show. Because just think about yourself. If that was me, if I was Mahogany, I'd be like, no, I don't want to be on a TV show, regardless of how I feel about Ben. I don't want to be on a reality TV show, so that's just not going to happen. Anyway, so because of the fallout, I mean, the amount of trouble and problems that people go through, I think, because of these shows is, it's notable. Anyway, so I think she might have thought, well, I mean, maybe it'll work with Ben. I don't know. If it weren't for the show, I wouldn't really be considering it. But let's see. And so from her point of view, I think she was starting over. She's like, yeah, all that tech stuff, that doesn't really mean anything. So I'm going to meet the guy, and he's coming on strong. And she's just like, golly, like, you're really coming at me, because he was in a different mindset, and it's understandable where he's coming from. He's a fool for doing that, because it's like it's texting and she's not talking to you on the phone. But he's in love. People fall in love. So he's really like, hey, like, and doing what other people do on the show, when they meet up, Brandon and Julia, when they see each other, it's, it's love. It's like, hey, so Ben thinks that's happening, and he had reasons to believe that. She shows up and she's just like, I'm starting over, as if I didn't even know him before, because I don't really know him. I have to get to know him. So that's that mismatch in the beginning where he's just like, and she's, and then, but over time, she's open to like, well, let's see, maybe. And then she has times where she vacillates, where it's just like, no, this isn't going to work. Get me out of here. That's when she, ditches him. But then later she thinks, well, maybe it'll work. Maybe the producers are involved, because this is all happening over a long period of time. So, you could see someone vacillating like, well, I don't know. Maybe it'll work with me and Ben, or maybe it could fun to date him for a few months. I don't know. Let's see it happen. So I think that would explain why we saw what we saw, but I don't know. But the other point that you bring up, Eve, is that he should know because he's in his 50s. I don't know how old you are, Eve, but I'm 51, and I have a lot of friends and clients who are around my age. Being older does not guarantee you have wisdom. I know I used to think that when I was young. I used to think by the time you're, 40, you should have it all kind of figured out. And it's kind of based on a notion that our parents seem to always know what's going on. But the older you get, the more you realize, like, there's not some book that you get at the age of 40 that somehow is like this new wisdom and you absorb it all. You have as much capacity and likelihood of being completely immature and a train wreck at 53 as you do at 22. It's just, well, maybe you're a little less likely at 53, but I'm not surprised. Let's just put it that way. And a lot of people on the show are, around that age, 50, and we've seen that they're not. And I think that's another part of the bias, because if you're younger and you're watching the show, you look at Mahogany and you're like, well, I mean, when I was 22, which was 3 years ago, yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going on. I'm just kind of winging it. But Ben should know better because he's 53. And I think that notion it's based on a false premise that somehow he's like discarding wisdom that was given to him based on his age, which, believe me, is not the case. Annika says, funniest part about that analogy about the lions and gazelles is that the lioness is the one that typically does the hunting. Yeah, I saw a number of comments like that. It's funny. Mbot says, I was raised with this kind of misogynist thinking, and it was so ingrained in me for a long time. It made dating very confusing and got me into abusive relationship for 10 years. Thank God I eventually met someone who opened my eyes to the fact that this stuff is total BS. Yeah, Mbot, I'm so sorry that you were in an abusive relationship for 10 years, and absolutely, when we have a misogynistic society, it contributes to not only the perpetration, but also the susceptibility to being victimized, which we have to change. Esmeralda says, thank you, Dr. Honda, for your input on the play hard to get tactic. So I was talking about how the lions and gazelles might be based on this playing hard. Well, he even literally says that, you got to play more hard to get. And I've never understood this tactic. Going on, I grew up in a neglectful home and was not taught how to properly date or interact with others in a healthy way. Because of that, I watch many YouTube and TikTok videos on tips for dating. Many of them tell women to lean back, act disinterested, and play hard to get, which does not feel natural to me and has not really worked thus far. It feels good to know that not having a specific strategy may actually be the best for me. Yeah, so the dating is complicated, relationships are complicated, and everyone is different. But the play hard to get tactic, I will say as a caveat, is applicable sometimes, rarely. When someone, generally speaking, pursues very hard in the beginning, it can be very off-putting to someone because, one, they're not ready to move forward, and two, they're like, they're scared of hurting you, because you're coming on so strong. They're like, well, I don't like them this much now. You might like them that much in the future, but you don't like them that much now, and you're just like, I'm going to hurt this person. I just need to nip this in the bud. Plus, no one likes to be pressured. So there are rare circumstances where people have a tendency to do that. In those situations, you do want to help them to learn not to play hard to get, but to just have more empathy, essentially, to just know what people are wanting and how they're going to react to things. So it's not playing a game, it's more having empathy. But that's rare. The play hard to get tactic is often recommended literally to everyone, particularly women, because women, slut shaming, all that kind of stuff. So this idea that you're always supposed to play hard to get, you're never supposed to. There's a comedian on YouTube that I like, Julie Nolke, I think her name is, and she just posted a video about you never double text. You're always supposed, if you're in the beginning of a relationship and you text someone and they haven't responded yet, you should never text again because it's not playing hard to get. You're being desperate. And spoiler alert, watch the video, but at the end of the video, she just starts kind of ranting about, like, can't we just be honest? People, let's just be on it. Why do we have to play these games? I completely agree. Regarding the play hard to get, why do people have this notion? Why do we have this notion in our culture? Why do we pass around this notion? And I've thought about this for many, many years because I noticed this being passed around a long time ago, and it didn't make any sense to me. Because when people are coupling, what's primarily happening is when people are dating, typically people are looking for a partner, right? They want to find someone who likes them, that they like the same amount. They're looking for compatibility. They're looking for all those kinds of things. So if two people meet and they very quickly really like each other, why should they play hard to get? Because they like each other. So I think one hypothesis I have as to why people always say play hard to get is because we've all experienced situations where there was a mismatch in terms of how much someone liked someone, which is really the default in dating. And side note, if you're dating right now and you're frustrated with it, I don't know, but it's possible that you haven't accepted yet the reality of dating, which is that I don't know what percentage of the time, but often there will be a mismatch in terms of attraction. And it's often considered to be, if you're ever experiencing a lot of attraction and being rejected, there will be these conclusions that people will come to. Of course, in the incel world, they'll say it's because of feminism. And other people might say it's because of hookup culture, or, men are psychopaths in this town, or whatever. There's no real men in this town. You'll hear these kinds of sayings, and it's impossible for me to know if those claims are accurate or not, because they're not really testable in terms of science. But my idea is that it's more the rule that you're going to find a mismatch in attraction than the exception. And so you have to accept that, because that's what you're getting into on both sides. You're going to experience someone who's more into you than you're into them, and you're going to be more into people than they're going to be into you. The magic is it's a numbers game. You just got to keep doing it until you find someone where you both are super into each other, and it takes time to find that person. So I think that because people have frequently experienced that mismatch, there's this, if you're the one pursuing you, and afterwards you end up blaming yourself because you're just like, well, what went wrong? And an easy conclusion, it's like, well, I pursued them. But if let's just say that there's a mismatch in attraction, and you play hard to get, now you're playing like you're not into them, and they just actually aren't into you that much. The relationship is also not going to take off. Now, there are small exceptions where this person with the low attraction, it might grow. So maybe, but it could also grow if you're pursuing. It's not necessarily guaranteed that if you play hard to get it, except for that situation I said earlier where you're being very forceful and claustrophobic inducing. So, but anyway, and I think what happens is we develop this rule, play hard to get, in retrospect to past situations. On the other side, if someone pursues you early in a dating situation and you feel claustrophobic, one of the primary conscious thoughts you have is back off, like give me some room. But what actually might be happening is you're just not into them. And so afterwards you look back on the situation and you say, if she had played hard to get, it would have worked out better. But would it have? Or was it just that you just weren't that into them, or you weren't into them as much as they were into you? And that's really the issue. I think people for some reason, have a really hard time accepting this difference, and so I think that's one of the reasons. But I think there are others as well. I think it's also kind of paternalistic, and so paternalistic in that you are supposed to control your feelings and you're not supposed to be vulnerable, right? I think it's also a power play, right? None of us like to feel out of control. And so when we are being, when we get rejected, it feels bad. And so next time I'm not going to really show my true feelings. Just kind of rings of that, right? And it's convenient to say that. So the conclusion I'll say is that dating is complicated, and there's no real hard and fast rules other than like have empathy, know yourself, and don't harm other people. PT says, when Jasmine and Gino video, when Jasmine and everyone else tells Gino to take off the hat, it kind of reminds me of when my female relatives tell me that I ought to shave my beard. I've been told that it makes me look dirty, less desirable, and even less employable. I just reply to them and say, I don't tell you what to do with your beard, and that usually makes them laugh and stop. Yeah, people need to stop telling people what to do with their bodies. Harrison says, as a trans man, it is so important to me myself. However, it completely grossed me out entirely for the whole cast to criticize Gino. He likes his hat, leave him alone. Yeah, agreed. Right. So when we criticize Gino and other people that are people with privilege, it doesn't feel oppressive, right? Because Gino or Donald Trump and his hair, we don't think, well, they're not oppressed individuals, so it's okay to do that to them. And what I'll say to that is no. Like, it's sort of like, it'd be like saying because someone is a politician and they're black, it's okay to be racist against them. We all understand that doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense in general, and it's not okay in general to body shame anyone and for any reason, generally speaking. I mean, maybe someone could give me an exception to that rule. So we're not super concerned about Gino. We're not super concerned about Donald Trump and how he feels about people criticizing his body or his hair or something. But we do want to concern ourselves with the general culture of that being okay, with humiliating people or commenting on things that don't have anything to do with anyone else. It's okay that Jasmine in the beginning said, you're a handsome man without your hat. You don't need it. As soon as he explained how he felt about it, it should have just been over at that point, because it's just a hat. It doesn't harm anyone. Gino and Jasmine video. Samantha says, it's a bold-faced lie, not a bald-faced lie. Dr. Kirk and his idioms. Agreed. I am terrible with my idioms. So apparently it's bold-faced lie instead of bald-faced lie. Huh. Okay. What am I thinking of when I think bald-faced lie? Anyway, yeah, me and my idioms. Rainy Day says, even Gino's emojis insist on wearing a hat. Oh, Yeah. So, yeah, the cowboy hat thing, it's like even his emojis wear hats. Sunny says, Gino is a panic liar. Like most panic liars, he's really bad at it. He needs to learn how to address his lies after he panic sputters them into existence, or he'll never build any trust. Yeah, absolutely. Panic lying, that's a good term. Mensch says, I definitely suffered from this lying in my teens and early 20s. And Dr. Honda's explanation that maybe Gino felt he needed to be a good boy or otherwise he was going to get rejected, that was 100% me. I lied all the time, about the littlest of things sometimes. Or if I felt I couldn't lie, I just said nothing. In my 20s, I had a complete mental breakdown. I went through depression and I dropped out of university and then lied about it to my parents for weeks. Eventually, I had to tell them, which was super rough. I learned not to lie after that. My parents were hurt, and that made me realize how destructive lying is. Before that, I honestly didn't see it that way. My mom especially was very critical to me, so I always felt it's better to just lie to avoid criticism and rejection. People have no idea how strong this compulsion can be. Yeah, absolutely. So, Mensch, you are absolutely aware of it. You've gone down that journey. You've done that path on your journey. And you're laying it out exactly as I've seen it clinically, that your mom was very critical of you, and so it was better to lie so you could avoid criticism and rejection from her, and it worked. And then you just retained this automatic lying behavior, and then when you were an adult, you continued to lie, and then when you realized how much hurt it could produce, you thought about it and broke the habit, which is good. And I'm sorry that you went through that growing up. And Gino might have had a similar background. Cosmic says, if I think I'm going to be in trouble, I will automatically lie instead of admitting something. I learned it when I was a child. If I owned up to something as a child, I would get punished for that thing. And if I lied, then sometimes I would get away with it. So there was a benefit to lying. Yeah, absolutely. So I hope you, Cosmic, can find a similar healing path as Mensch has experienced. Gino and Jasmine video, solo drainage video. I didn't know how I felt about that title when I came up with that. I thought, is this one of the better titles I've ever had or one of the worst? I don't know. Jessica says, as a biologist, I get really annoyed when people use the term drain your balls, and I wish people paid more attention to anatomy, especially for their own health. Only sperm are produced in the testicles. Seminal fluid is produced in the seminal vesicles, which are internal and closer to your prostate. Dr. Honda is absolutely correct that there are no negatives to ejaculating less often. Always talk to your doctor if you notice sudden or drastic changes in your body or sexual health, especially as you age. Toxic masculinity can make men avoid seeking health professionals when they need to. Yeah, I always love it when professionals chime in with information, so thank you for that, Jessica. And yeah, spread science and information. That's good. Catherine says, I really appreciate your spiel about everyone has to do their part. Oh, so I was talking about how we all need to do our part to move our society forward regarding social justice. I remember when American Pie came out, and while I didn't love it, it felt like this is just how things are in our society. I feel the same rewatching How I Met Your Mother, and that is much more recent of a show. The misogyny, fat phobia, etc. in that show are pretty shocking to see now. The problems we are facing today seem so overwhelming that it's tempting to just give up, but apathy and resignation only serve the interests of the oppressors. It's a very important message from you, Dr. Anna, so thank you. Yeah, regarding How I Met Your Mother, I similarly, I was watching some clips on, somehow YouTube thought I wanted to watch How I Met Your Mother. I don't know why. And I was watching some clips because I didn't watch that show really when it came out. And I thought, whoa, this show is, this is, one, it's not really that funny to me. And two, it's pretty awful. I mean, not all the time, but frequently. The thing to think about is who is the joke on? And when I watch How I Met Your Mother, well, I'll talk about like Friends. I was, rewatching it. There's a channel on cable that literally, I think all night long, they just play Friends episodes. I think it's Nickelodeon or something anyway. And so my wife will sometimes just kind of relax and just watch Friends, and sometimes I'll watch with her. And there's a frequent joke on Friends where Chandler and Joey will hug, and then they'll be like, gay, or and maybe it's not that overt, but it's that joke. And at the time, of course, and I did watch Friends back then, it probably was just like, oh, funny. But given what we know now, or given what I know now, meaning that joke is on gay people, and I have heard from enough gay people, and really I only need to hear from one to really internalize this, that those kind of jokes obviously hurt them, because it implies that it's disgusting or some sort of an abomination or wrong for two men to not only just be affectionate with each other, which is a toxic masculinity thing just among heterosexuals, but also it's just wrong to be gay, right? And so the joke isn't on the perpetrators of that statement, it's on gay people. Whereas, in my opinion, shows like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which is one of my favorite shows, in the early seasons, some of those jokes don't age well at all, but they're not that bad in my opinion. But when you watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, the joke is on the racists, the joke is on the sexists, the joke is on the main cast members are horrible human beings. That's the whole premise of the show, and they will exhibit sexism, racism, fat phobia, etc. And everyone else around them reacts to them and says, like, what's wrong with you? So the joke, we're laughing at the racist. It's similar to All in the Family in the 70s. It was a very popular show. Similar to, akin to It's Always Sunny, in that the main character was a racist, sexist, sort of man. But everyone around him was, reacting to him as if he was wrong. You could argue that All in the Family doesn't really hold up in terms of that today. I haven't rewatched those shows, but my point is that, yeah, How I Met Your Mother, it's awful. And now, we don't want to look at How I Met Your Mother and say, what's wrong with you? We want to look back at our society and say, what's wrong with us in the past? That one, people would make a show like, or have jokes like that, and two, that we all thought it, or the majority of people thought it was funny, or not enough people actually spoke up against that, So it's not an indictment on How I Met Your Mother or American Pie. It's an indictment on us. And I think that's important to really internalize. Anyway, my dogs are barking at something. Plot Whisperer says, okay, it just seems like breathing is cheating to Jasmine. Personally, I would be emotionally drained by someone like this. Right, so Plot is saying Jasmine seems to get... Jasmine thinks everything is cheating. Yeah, well, I've hypothesized about preoccupied attachment with her and abandonment traumas, which seem to be there, but who knows. Danielle and Mohammed video. Ali says, you've absolutely changed my life for the better, Dr. Honda. Not only did I convince my boyfriend to seek therapy for his childhood sexual abuse, but he went to rehab and is loving his sobriety. I am also in school to become a legal sociologist, and you have inspired me to minor in psychology. Thank you for everything. Wow, Ali, that's just great. I mean, I'm so happy for you and your boyfriend, but also to think that I would have been a catalyst for that I played a tiny, tiny part in the influence that, your life is now going better. I don't know how to describe this without centering me in this. My point is that it's great to hear. And it is my primary mission on this YouTube channel and in life to be the catalyst along these lines, because people deserve a catalyst along those lines. And so, I can really imagine what life would have been like if you hadn't been able to convince your boyfriend to go to therapy, if he hadn't then gone to rehab and hadn't got sober. Like, that future can be pretty bleak. And then I think about the future that you're on now, the path you're on now, and I get chills just thinking about how wonderful that is. And again, just to think that I could just play a tiny part as a catalyst on that journey, again, as my primary mission. And that's what being a therapist is all about. You're there trying to be that catalyst. And there were a lot of comments actually along these lines that I read, because in this video I must have talked about something along these lines. And so I appreciate all those comments. They keep me going, honestly. Like every day, not every day, but frequently I will check comments and emails and stuff, communication from y'all, as a way of being connected and replying or answering questions, or I don't know, just getting the lay of the land. Did I make any sense in that video? What did people take away from it? And that exposes me to negative comments, and some negative comments are great, like saying bold-faced lie instead of bald-faced lie. It's like, it's fine. And even more critical things are fine as well. But some critical things, as I've said before, can really hit home. The antidote to that, though, often are these kinds of comments. And that's obvious, right? But I really do need that. It is for me to continue, as I've been doing this for 14 years, podcasting and being a YouTube person, these kinds of comments are, if I didn't have them, I'm sure I would have given up a long time ago. Like if y'all didn't let me know that there's even a slight chance that what I'm saying is helpful or something, So I really appreciate it, and it really does give me the emotional fuel to do this. And what I'll say is, I find that I'm able to be vulnerable in that way. A lot of people, my colleagues, have a harder time with that. I don't know, but I surmise that they have the same need that I do. Maybe not as much as I do, but they have a hard time admitting it. It's like, I don't care what people think. So my tip to y'all, one, if you're in that position like me, if you're a teacher or some kind of helper, recognize that you have needs of positive feedback, because that's why you're in it. You're in it. You're doing this whole thing. If you're a dentist, probably the reason why you became a dentist is because you wanted people to, you wanted to help people. And so one, notice that vulnerability, maybe ask and sort of signal the way that I have to do. But also, if you're ever in that position to give feedback to your dentist, to give feedback to your doctor, to give feedback to your teacher or your parents, know that that is what keeps them going in life. That when you say, thank you for that, or you helped me in that way, that could literally be the primary reason why they wake up in the morning, is hoping for some indication like that. So we all deserve that. And don't give in to the sexist, paternalistic hype that having those kinds of needs or expressing those kinds of needs is some kind of weakness, because it's not. Winstonian says, I started dating my current partner pretty immediately after separating from my ex. So in this video, I was talking about how the rebounds won't work idea is silly. I started dating my current partner pretty immediately after separating from my ex and was quote unquote a rebound. My current partner and I were pretty good friends for a couple of years, just over 5 years now together, and I'm ridiculously still happy with him. I heard the rebound won't work from multiple people when we first started dating. Yeah, this is similar to the always play hard to get thing. I've never understood where this comes from. Of course, there's no data to support this idea. And the primary hypothesis I have as to why people perpetrate this notion in our culture is that as a friend, when we have say one of your friends goes through a really difficult breakup, and you're there for them, you're supporting them, and you're with them up and down. It can be kind of messy, and then they break up finally, and there's like they're over, and you as an observer, as a supporter, you can finally relax and sort of let out a breath. Then your friend starts dating again, and that brings anxiety back. And I think from that anxiety comes, well, how do I justify? I have anxiety. I have an impulse to say, don't date anyone. How do I justify telling them what to do? Well, I will pull from culture this notion that I've heard thousands of times that rebounds don't work. And I will perpetrate that because that will force them to not date again. And then I can go back to relaxing because I don't want to have to worry about my friend. And that has more to do with your own differentiation than it has to do with, the decisions that your friend is making regarding when they start dating. Now, as an asterisk, might there be situations where people jump right back into a relationship because they're dependent or lack self-esteem or they can't stand being alone or something like that? Yeah, for sure. But to just blanketly apply that to every single relationship, and some people consider rebounds to be like 6 months later or something, the other just some caveats on this or some other details of this is that, say you're in a 10-year marriage and you get divorced and then you start dating a month later. Well, there's a lot of positives to that. One is that you have some fun. It can be very fun to date. It can be very interactive. You actually might meet the next person that you spend 10 years with. You might not, you probably won't, but you can get some confirmation that you're attractive. You can get sexual needs met or romance needs met or I don't know, whatever needs met. And needs that you probably haven't been getting because divorces usually happen after years of distance and disappointment in people. So you're very thirsty at that point. And maybe, you only date for a couple months with someone, but you get a lot out of that potentially. There's a lot of pros to a rebound, even when you know that it's not likely to last forever. So as long as you're just kind of aware of yourself and you're communicative with your partner, you say, by the way, I just got divorced, so don't really count on me, to think about long-term relationships. But, if you'd like to just casually date for a few months, then I would love to do that with you, that kind of. So rebounds can actually be very curative in a lot of ways. Of course, rebounds can be very destructive, but just to say never have a rebound, I don't know. And it's funny because the first time I heard this was when I was probably in the 6th grade. I remember hearing about rebounds when I was a kid, and it's funny that adults still say it. Anyway. All right, y'all. What's the final word on today? Do you take notes? Looking at that first one on any of my podcast. If so, what have you written down? I'm curious. I don't know. Do you just comment below maybe what you've done? Oh, also, I'm sure y'all know I'm on TikTok now. I've been wanting to do it for a long time, and I started doing it earlier, just on Monday, and I have no idea what I'm doing. There's all these formatting issues. So what I'm doing basically is I'm making little videos, little minute videos, which is really hard for me to do because I talk so much. And I'm not only posting on my TikTok, but I'm also posting them on YouTube and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. And I have to say, when I first started this podcast, I remember when this is 2008, they're like, you have to have a Facebook. And I'm like, I don't want a Facebook. And then when Instagram, you got to have an Instagram. I'm like, I don't want an Instagram. You got to have a Twitter. I don't like to be bogged down by things. It's so much busy work. I mean, if you are in charge of a brand, it's an all day thing. It's so tedious and there's so many interfaces. None of them are the same and the formats are all effed up. And so it's very time consuming. And I just want to make content. I don't want to futz with a website or an app or God knows what. I just want to make content and have it just be out there. And but people say, well, some people don't look at YouTube ever. Some people's only social media is TikTok. And so if you're going to reach people, you got to go there. And so anyway, I started doing that and I have no idea what I'm doing. And I don't know if I'm even going to continue doing it, honestly. Although I just looked today, I posted a video on gaslighting the other day, and it has 615,000 views. 615,000 views. I mean, on YouTube, that would be a lot for me. And I'm like, it's, TikTok, you can reach a lot of people on TikTok. So anyway, know that. You might have been seeing that. But if you're a YouTube person, every video I post on TikTok will also be posted on YouTube. YouTube has the shorts thing, which is kind of their version of TikTok. So know that. Because I heard some people were like, oh crap, I don't look at TikTok. I don't want to have to go there. It's, you don't have to, but what else am I going to say? Yeah. Well, me and Stacy are going to go out to dinner and relax, have a couple drinks. I'll probably post pictures on Instagram because I usually do. Why do I do that? Because I think it's, before social media, I've always been a picture taker and a documenter, like way before social media. In fact, when I first heard about it in like 2006, because, MySpace, I always tried to make MySpace into a place where I could catalog pictures, of my family and whatnot. Because I always found it, because I would, so this is a side note, but when I was like in my late 20s, this is in the 90s, way before social media, I actually would catalog pictures. I would get actual hard copy pictures, photographs from family members, stuff, and I would organize them. And I got these 3-ring binders and these special sleeves for 4x6 pictures, and I would organize them by time, and I'd look at the picture and I think, okay, when was that? It was probably 1979. I'd organize it all, and I'd put so much effort in it because I don't know what it is about me, but I just really like doing that kind of thing. And then the only time anyone could ever see because this was for my family, a lot of it was just like, and then the only time people could see it is if they happened to be at my house, and I'd be like, here, look at this thing I did. And, they'd be like, oh, nice. And so I always, when MySpace came out, I thought, oh, this will be good because I could post pictures. It never really worked that well. But when Facebook came out, I was like, this is going to be great because you can tag people and you have, all the things we know about Facebook. So I think it's that I still have all that with me. I still take pictures of my food. I still take pictures of, whatever I'm seeing. I take videos. And I don't know why. It just feels satisfying to document. I'd keep a journal. And to some extent, this podcast kind of satisfies that. It's a document of my ramblings and my relationships with other people, with Bob and Berto and Rebecca and others. Anyway, so I think that's why I do it, is I post pictures. I'm just rambling at this point. But so look out for pictures of me and my wife having dinner tonight. I'm thinking Italian. I have a craving for spaghetti, good spaghetti, like really good spaghetti and good sauce. But we'll see what happens because I haven't asked my wife what she wants to eat. We have to negotiate that. Everyone out there, take care of yourself, and don't listen to culture, or be very skeptical of the rules of culture like Rebounds are dumb and always play hard to get, because you deserve it. You really, really do.